Only 2 games matching ranked opponents this week, yet it feels as if there are gargantuan games all over the landscape in college football. This is the College GameDay podcast, Picks Edition for Friday, September 8th. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and as always when we make picks, joined by Stanford Steve. Steve, before we start diving into picks and wagering and things of that nature, for those watching on YouTube, I believe you're representing the Fullerton Titans, or that is a Fullerton F on your head, is it not? Or is it a Florida?
That sure is. As you,
I thought so.
No. This is the Titans.
No.
This is the Titans of Fullerton. Goes back to a bet I lost with Stanford and Fullerton to now Angels manager Mr. Phil Nevins. So I was told or had to wear gear. So I do like the lid.
Would you view your maiden voyage as a full-time member of our Game Day family as a Titanic achievement? Not Titanic that crashed, but I mean like giant, wildly successful. I would.
Yeah,
I would.
It was as much fun. Like I said, I think I told you, Desmond and I go out there early, tape something for SportsCenter at 7:30, and to see and feel that energy was just really, really eye-opening. I had traveled with Game Day, on the radio side and been around the show, but to be up there for 3+ hours, knowing, what all comes with it, and, doing a lot of things for the first time on the fly, it was as fun as I've ever had doing the job. And it was just really cool to be a part of it. And I cannot wait to get on a campus, and then we look and see, like you said, the worst kept secret all summer was that we're going to be in Tuscaloosa week 2. We're here. It's official. I would love, you would know, Rece. I was actually, my first question for Marissa, like, we have a tally of the number of times we've been to Tuscaloosa has to be up there, right?
I think it's second to Columbus, I think. Okay. I'd have to look at that. Columbus leads the way. We've been to Ohio State more than anywhere else, and a lot of that has been boosted by that. I think the statute of limitations have expired on this. So like early on, well before I was on the show, there used to be, and the entire mindset at Alabama has changed since Nick Saban arrived, right? I used to equate Alabama and Michigan in terms of administration fans. Only difference was different accents. There was, there was this feeling of we're aristocracy in the sport. You come and try not to bother with what we have in place. Sort of like that old Michigan AD who said, Michigan will kick off at 1:00 Eastern time, no matter what. And we see where that went. Well, there was a great story from Saban's first year when Game Day was going to go there. And that it causes, the universities work with us beautifully on logistics. It causes some issues from time to time. And apparently there was someone in the meeting, not a decision maker, but someone in the meeting who said, can't they just go somewhere else? Meaning Game Day. This was way back first year. And someone who was close to Saban looked at the guy and said, are you volunteering to go down the hall and tell the new boss that we're telling Game Day, why don't you go somewhere else? And that was sort of the end of that discussion, right? So, we've been there a lot. And it is, this is different though, Steve, because there haven't been, because of their philosophy of getting into those neutral site games, both for the payout, but mostly for the exposure in various recruiting areas. They've played their big non-conference games in those one-offs. The home and home things that they've scheduled, starting with Texas, and then there are a ton of them the next few years against the biggest names. Haven't seen a lot of those. Penn State came in with Joe Paterno, but this is different. Yeah. It's hard to get that city and that campus excited about a regular season game, particularly in September. And this is electrified. We haven't even gotten there, and you can feel it from the talk that we've had. It's electric there already.
And I'm sure we'll get into it, but it is a sense, Rece, I think, and you would know and are talk to a lot more than I get a sense of we want to show our difference in Alabama, in the fan base. Like, I think Texas is walking into the old school Denny Stadium at night, and whereas maybe complacent is the word. We're Bama fans where they've had these early games and, it's been Middle Tennessee and, they have, been up a ton and gotten back to their murder ball. They like playing and burying teams in the second half and running the ball nonstop. I feel a different sense. I was there for the Penn State game back in the day. I was there for the Manziel game. And when that one happened, and this feels like it's going to be back to those crowds. I just feel like the energy and the idea of knowing, you mentioned it, all these games have been on the road. Now we get them here in Tuscaloosa. I expect a very raucous crowd Saturday night, and I hope hopefully they start Saturday morning. So I cannot wait. As I said, it was a little different going out there at 7:30 with a jammed place to tape a segment for SportsCenter. It was a little louder than taping Bad Beats with Scott in the studio. So it alerted me, got my focus right off the get. So it was real appreciative of it. And I got, like I said, can't wait to get back to it.
I was told by someone in the industry about a month ago that this will be the hardest ticket in sports until the Super Bowl. Now, Coach Prime has made the tickets, like if you talk to the secondary market people this week, Coach Prime has made those tickets expensive. Now, Old Boulder's a little smaller than Tuscaloosa, so there's some supply-demand in effect. But I think we're going to see celebrities. Like, you remember, this is sort of the time when the NBA is down, right? Like, if you're a bold-faced name in sports and you want a college football experience before your basketball season starts up. So I think the sidelines are going to be jammed. I'm fired up to be down there and be like, oh, look, there's that person. So I think the energy's coming, and it's coming from the student body, and it's going to come from one of the great fan bases in the sport. But I do think there is, like, because it's Texas, there's an extra layer than I remember in Austin last year. Like, just an extra layer of interest, celebrity that, like, pushes it into pop culture maybe that we maybe didn't have before.
I think Glenn Powell, who was our guest picker last year, is going to be there. Obviously a Texas fan. I hear he's bringing Sydney Sweeney with him, who's a rising star actress who will be rooting for Alabama in the game. All kinds of. I'm assuming that the Minister of Culture from the University of Texas will be there. Still remains to be seen. I don't think there are plans for Joe Namath to be there at the moment, but perhaps, who knows? Broadway Joe might decide to come and make an appearance there, and we'll document his what-if story in this Alabama-Texas rivalry, if you want to call it that, as few times as they've played, but there have been some memorable games and a lot of what-if moments, and not all of them are what if Colt or Quinn didn't get hurt. Some of them are what if Namath didn't get hurt? What if they hadn't missed a quarterback stepping out of bounds? There's a lot of memorable moments, and we assume that there will be a few more made on Saturday night in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Steve, by the way, high-level meeting yesterday. We're working on your props for your fridge over there, so there could be changes in the offing there, upgrades already. You come in 1 week, and you're already potentially getting a whole kitchen makeover, so that's a pretty good deal for you.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
A set suggestion? Certainly, I don't even make suggestions about my own kitchen and my own condo, so I'm certainly not I'm not exactly the upgrade specialist, but I think Stanford Steve's fridge, all these collectives are brewing their own beer to try to get you to buy beer to support the collective. I think, like, your fridge should have local collective beer in it every week. Perhaps after the show, if a reporter's thirsty after trying to chase down all those ankle sprains and injuries, he maybe let's just have a nice cold beer in the late morning to do that. Do you think that's a good idea, Steve? Do you think we could muster the muscle of the collectives to try to get some suds in that fridge?
That's a great idea. I would think Rece would need something after I saw the pictures he's got to take post-show. So he's the first guy I want to take care of in a post-show manner.
He does talk for 3 hours, so he deserves it.
That line is just – Roman's just waving him on like a third base coach, and that line was never ending. It was like the kids get to run the bases at the end of a game. Yeah. Man, you couldn't even get out of there. So props to Rece for being the man that he is and doing what he does and being there and seeing it, and then being the president, putting that president smile on for those pictures post-show. That was a treat to watch.
You know what? I always try to look. You're fried. You don't remember everything that happened. I always go back and watch the show the next day and make some notes about it and so forth. in that moment, it's hard to remember exactly what happened, but the one thing I do try to remember is that when people come up to be part of the show and to take their picture or whatever it might be the end of 3 hours for me. It might be the, 30th picture for, Des, coach, and me, who we stay after to take those pictures. It's the first for the people coming up. And that's their personal connection with game day. And I want them to enjoy that. I'm wildly appreciative to the people who come out there for 3 hours before the game, oftentimes when it's pretty hot, as it was in Charlotte, and as I assume it will be in Tuscaloosa tomorrow. They come out there and they want to be part of it. And man, that's gratifying. And I want them to enjoy that. And I want them to have a good experience. I don't want them to walk away and go, well, the show was good, but those guys aren't very personable or whatever, so I want them to, to have a good feeling about it, because I'm really appreciative to the people who come out and give us the atmospheres that we have every week. It's phenomenal. And hopefully Alabama fans will do that. Sometimes Alabama fans historically have been, I wouldn't say to the extent that we tease North Carolina fans about, but they're a little bit like, well, wait on the game. I want them to come and show out. And, it's a beautiful setting on the quad. It's one of the great campuses. I think I can say that even as an alum without a lot of bias, it's one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. We'll showcase that, and hopefully they'll come out and showcase their rooting interest and make for a great atmosphere. And we've got some special things planned for them tomorrow morning to make the entire experience, both at home and on the quad with us, be memorable. And certainly the game should be as well. How did we do last week on our picks? I have a feeling we did okay, right?
Feel like you're bringing it up because you did okay.
He's the host. He gets to make those decisions.
Oh, really? Did they? Hey, Steve. I'm like, listen, I did do okay last week. As LC pointed out, Lee Corso pointed out, when we were talking about the Ohio State-Indiana game last week, back in the day, LC's team took the lead when he was at Indiana on Ohio State, and he stopped and took a picture of the scoreboard. That's what I want to do right now. I want to stop and take a picture of last week's scoreboard, because this may not come your way again, right? So, but no,
good. Props to you.
I actually wasn't bringing it up because of that. It made for good content and good fodder right there. We had a laugh, but mostly to set up. Let's see what we can do this week. So, Taylor, how did it go last week?
Well, Rece, you were right. You went 5-2. Pete 4-3. Steve 3-4. Overall, Steve is atop the leaderboard, 7-7. Rece and Pete, both of you guys at 6-8. So very close right now. This is exciting. We're going to pick a ton of games right here. So a lot of movement could be had after this weekend.
All right.
Let's
go.
Hey, let's start with the big one. What do you say, Taylor? Let's just start with Texas and Alabama, right?
Well, let's rip it off. Texas at Alabama. Alabama, a 7-point favorite. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go Rece, Steve, Pete.
And what's the number on that, Taylor? 7?
Alabama, 7-point favorite.
Okay, Alabama's 7-point favorite there. This is a landmark game for Texas. This is a prove-it game for Texas. They have been dreadful since that 2009 national championship game against the Crimson Tide relative to elite program expectations. In that span, since they played for the national championship, Alabama's worst record since then was 10-3. Alabama's worst record in that span is better than the Longhorns' best record during that time frame. Think about that for a minute. Texas is 4-18 in ranked matchups since that national championship game. Alabama's also lost 18 times in ranked matchups since that game, but they've won 67. And among teams that have played 10 or more ranked matchups during that span, the only team worse than Texas is Mississippi State. They're 3-6 on the road under Sark. This is it. This is the moment. I've said all summer, and I stick by it. I have no question, no doubt in my mind that Texas is going to play great. Sarkisian his offenses have fared well against Kevin Steele defenses. It is fair to say that Sarkisian had Alabama talent and Mac Jones and Tua and, and all those Devontae Smith, against probably not the same level of talent that Kevin Steele had at Auburn. But he's fared well against them. This is the moment. They'll play well now. The question for Texas about how good they are is how well will they play when the spotlight is not as bright. Games are supposed to win. But on this game, Saturday night, they'll bring their best. I think the real question, the injuries in the Alabama secondary, how well will they be able to defend the deep ball? Quinn Ewers, the numbers suggest he hasn't been great throwing the ball downfield. He doesn't have a touchdown pass in his career on a pass that goes longer than 20 yards, according to our stats. He'll probably have one because they're going to take shots downfield against the Alabama corners. All of that said, man, I think Jalen Milroe is going to step forward again. I think he's made a great improvement. I think it's going to be a tight game. And I think Alabama wins and barely covers the spread. So I'm going to go with the Crimson Tide.
You touched on so much good stuff, Rece. Watching the tape, I cannot wait. And this is the fun stuff, right? Because you mentioned Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, Jalen Milroe, all the guys on the perimeter. Those are the guys that are going to be talked on the offensive side of the ball. I can't wait to see the matchup inside. Alabama's talked about how much, they've changed and how much more physicality they're going to bring to the table on the offensive line. Well, they're going to get it. They're going to get a big-time test. I mean, watching Texas roll through guys on that defensive line, you saw the difference they made last year. They gave it to Alabama up front last year, and all those guys are back. And now, you factor in a kid Sweat, who was a wrecking ball last week. I get it. It was Rice, but they are difference makers up front. And I actually think, watching Alabama, you start to see the pieces of the old Nick Saban defenses. You got your great rush end in Dallas Turner. You got a guy that looks familiar because he wears 32 in the middle of that defense. He looks like a player in Lawson. And, freshman safety in Downs, who was making plays. I may be nuts here. I think Texas is deeper on defense. Alabama, they have it. They have all the goods. I wonder about the depth, and I'm sure Pete will update us, tomorrow as far as status for that, those guys that are on the Bama injury report. But you said it. I do expect Texas to play well. I think it's a classic case of you got Sark, who's in control of calling his plays, and on the other side, I think Tommy Rees is going to be a caged animal, knowing what Saban wants to do and establish that defense, but knowing that his team's prepared. You saw the deep balls Milroe hit last week. It was a pleasure to see him execute those. He has all the goods. But I think it's a classic case. Defense dominates. I think 24 points wins this game. There's a total out there of, I think it's 55.5, 56.5. I think it goes low. And I'm picking Alabama to win, but I think I'm going to take Texas to cover the number.
A lot of good depth there, and I did a big dig in on Texas this week. Talked to the scouts who went through there this summer, and this may be Texas's best NFL draft class in terms of numbers ever. I think this is the best Texas roster since the Colt got hurt game. That was the 2009 season 10 title game. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
10 Rose Bowl?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So a bunch of scouts have told me that they feel like this is Texas's best roster since then. And I think it's fair to say that Texas 1 to 30 probably has more talent than Bama, draftable talent than Bama. Now, again, talent's hard to gauge, right? Because Caleb Downs doesn't count in that conversation, and he might end up 10 years from now being the best player on the field for both sides here. So there's different ways to look at it, but I just think when you talk to evaluators, they are unusually bullish on Texas and Texas's chance to win. I've had 2 scouts tell me they think Texas is a playoff team, like just simply put. And I value scouts. They go in, they don't, they're not biased by anything but the talent in front of them. So I had one veteran scout tell me this, and it was sort of the crux of what my ESPN.com piece is about this morning. So at the end of all these conversations, I say, all right, can Texas win? And this was the quote, and I thought it was instructive to making a pick here. Quote, I would think it's the wiring of the player when adversity hits. In the past, they haven't responded well to it. They've had the lead, and once things went bad, they don't recover from it. The biggest thing is pushing through adversity, the mental toughness of it. I think that's what they've lacked. If Texas has to come from behind, I don't know if they can win. If they have a lead, it'll be interesting. So I think a lot of the talent is going to meet the moment. And that's where, to me, the biggest variable comes in. So I do not yet trust Jalen Milroe to throw the ball down the field. And that is one way of saying I don't trust Jalen Milroe to exploit Texas's biggest weakness. Because if you talk to the evaluators, corner and safety is where they're pedestrian once you get past Jahdae Barron, who's like a reasonably good nickel, but not, he's not a first-team All-American. He's, a fourth-round pick type teams guy in the league. Again, very good players. You need those players to be a playoff team. So, and again, I think Milroe's great. I think he has room to grow. I just haven't seen him exploit a team in that way in the very small sample size that we've gotten. So I'm going to take Texas, and I'm going to take Texas to win. And I'm going to spend most of Saturday regretting it because I always try to not pick against games that I'm going to sit there and be like, you dumb jerk. Why did you possibly put yourself in this position? But I'm going to do it because this is posited on the talent, and Quinn Ewers being better positioned with the skill he has. They could have 3 and maybe even 4 receivers go to the NFL off this Texas team. They have a definitive advantage at the wide receiver position. So I think Quinn Ewers is better positioned to exploit that compared to Jalen Milroe. I thought what Bill Connolly told us, Rece, on the midweek pod, that Alabama only attempted 2 intermediate passes. So I think that shows you how they trust Jalen Milroe. Does Texas spy Milroe? That's an interesting notion too. When you think about some of the talent they have at linebacker. Do they take Anthony Hill, who's their gilded 5-star freshman, kind of and put him out there to make sure Milroe doesn't have those explosive plays out? So I am going to hook them, and then you can tease me on the sideline on Saturday night.
But you know what? You're a genius if you hit that one. And the other thing too is, if I'm wrong about Milroe, how quickly do they go to Tyler Buckner, or do they? Is it Ty Simpson? If they need to throw the ball down the field, if that becomes the issue. So,
I think the same thing on the other side.
Really? Now see, I don't, Steve. I think this is Quinn Ewers' game. Period. I know you're not talking about Arch either. You're probably talking Malik Murphy.
No,
right?
I'm talking about Malik.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think both. I think with Bama, you're going to see, I think, Jalen Milroe and quarterback design runs. And then on the other flip side, I could see Murphy coming in for that if they need that. So I would not be shocked if we see, more than 4 quarterbacks in this game, just because of situation. Like I said, the beginning of this game is so crazy. You got, the student and the teacher, all that stuff. But I just, Sark, I respect the hell out of him as a play caller, and I do as Tommy Rece too. But we know with Tommy, there's a guy ahead of him that likes to have the reins on the horse. So it's a fascinating matchup. I cannot wait. But I think this roster for Texas, you talk to scouts, it could be better than that championship team.
Oh,
wow. It really could. Yeah. It really could. The depth, and that's why Texas is so confident. You talk to them. Those guys have all coached in the SEC. Mm-hmm. They know what it takes to go on the road. That's what I think breeds this excitement and confidence in Sark and his staff, knowing that they're going on the road with a full roster of guys that can compete.
Here's a stat for you guys. 16 guys are getting written up at Texas. So now, again, that means they may have 10 drafted, but you also have 6 free agent type guys. The most intriguing, because I get teased on this podcast for going in the weeds occasionally, but I think this is indicative of the level of talent there, as Texas has a senior DB named Keaton Crawford, who is such an elite gunner that he's going to probably get drafted late. So again, when you have a guy like that and he's maybe not like a starter, I think that just shows you a little bit of the depth and roster flexibility and how it's built. Now, Rece, tell me this, is you obviously track Bama close. Were you surprised Buckner didn't get in earlier against Middle? Now, this would not have been an indictment of the way Jalen Miller played because he mowed him down. But just in terms of wanting to have him get a few more like live snaps before the game was over for the potential of what Steve's talking about, where this game goes a little sideways and you need a different look. Did that surprise you guys?
I wondered about it. I think we might have talked about it on the podcast, and I said that would be the biggest indication to me of whether there was any separation. Clearly, there wasn't a large degree of separation during this quarterback competition, but historically, if it's dead even, they have played the other guy third series. I think back, when A.J. McCarron won the thing against Phillip Sims, even McElroy and this guy Star Jackson. I think he might have gotten in early, way back in the day. But so that was an indication to me that there was at least some separation, that Milroe had a little breathing room there. It will be interesting to see. The one little thing, Pete, just to endear you to the locals this week, you mentioned about the Colt McCoy game in Tuscaloosa. That's not what if Colt had gotten hurt. That game is what if McElroy hadn't played with broken ribs and could have actually used Julio. That's what they say. So just that will
very
that
fair.
will
McElroy hates the Colt part. That's why I brought it up. McElroy absolutely hates that part. Well, they probably call it the Marcel Darius game.
I was just gonna say,
who by the way, I hope I'm not divulging secrets, is an honorary captain for Alabama this week, along with Dante Hightower, who was also part of that squad. So
that shows you a little window into the DNA of Alabama, doesn't it? When you got those two dudes as your honorary captains. Baller.
Love to see it.
Man. So we've got an Alabama win and cover from me. We've got a Texas win outright from Pete. We've got an Alabama win, Texas covers from Steve. So, hey, the way I see it, we're covered. The podcast has it covered right here. What do you got, Taylor?
All right, we got a bunch of really interesting games here, so let's start flying through some of these. We'll start with Nebraska at Colorado. Colorado, a 3-point favorite at home. That's at 12 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Steve, Pete, Rece.
Obviously, all eyes will be on this one in the early window, noon kick Eastern. Fascinating matchup of styles here, because say what you want of Matt Rule, as ugly as it was last week, that guy knows how to coach. And it's really, I cannot wait to see what he does, seeing how bad TCU was defensively and knowing he likes his guys in the back end in the secondary for Nebraska. They played great, I thought, last week. I get it. It's Minnesota. It's not the speed of Colorado. So that's the matchup here, is what does Sean Lewis do to combat an inferior offensive line against a defensive guy, a guru and Rule. That's the matchup. I still believe that Colorado's got enough speed. And Shedeur impressed the heck out of me with how precise and how definitive and how quick he was with the ball. On this game, being on turf, the advantage to speed, I see Colorado doing it again. I'm going to lay the 3 with Colorado.
I'm going to disagree again. So we're going to create some separation here. We may toast at the beer fridge the death of me in the picks pool in week 2, just like McAfee pulled away with the Buffs. I'm going to take Nebraska in the points. I just think this is going to be a close game. I think TCU and the way they play with Kendall Brothers as the OC perfectly fed into Colorado, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to quote Rece Davis from the Monday Pod, styles make fights. I just think this is a completely different football game. It's almost like a different sport from what we saw last week. And it's going to, I think, test much further the offensive line for Colorado, which I'm still skeptical of. It's certainly going to test the depth on both lines more. Nebraska ran the belly option quite a bit in that game. And I'll just be curious if Colorado has the fortitude in the front 7 to step up and take a methodical pounding. There's going to be some keep away in this game. There's going to be a lot of QB run from Jeff Sims. It'll be interesting to see how Rule manages the clock, because I do think it behooves him to shorten this game. But I am going to take the Cornhuskers making it ugly and coming out on top by a field goal.
When not much is expected of you, and then you burst onto the scene the way Colorado did, that presents its own set of challenges, and it will for the Buffs. Not for Deion Sanders. He can handle it. Not for Shedeur Sanders. His maturity is evident. He'll be fine. And not for Travis Hunter, who is used to the attention. But there are a lot of other players on that team who are getting pats on the back, maybe for the first times in their career, because a lot of them were talented guys that went to Colorado because things just hadn't clicked at their previous stop. Now, all of a sudden, they're part of something big, and you've got to come back to earth. They've got a veteran coaching staff who can do that with them, and Deion is a hard rear end, because I don't want to say a bad word on here. He's a tough guy, man. All of the other stuff that you see with the charisma and personality, if you think that indicates that he's not tough and hard on his players, you're wrong. He'll do everything he can, but he's also fighting human nature a little bit. But then there's also the human nature of Nebraska. And I know I'm supposed to go short. Sarah, please stop me from doing this. Sarah, please stop me from feeling like Nebraska is going to win, because I'm going to take Nebraska. I'm going to take Nebraska, but I want to offer this caveat. If it is a close game, meaning single digits, Nebraska will lose. Until I see them win one close, Nebraska will lose if it's close. I'm going to say Nebraska is able to control things up front. They don't make as many catastrophic errors down the stretch. And I say that they win by 10. I'm going to say Nebraska wins.
Wow.
Okay.
I was in Nebraska's defense looked awesome against Minnesota.
Yep.
For
Minnesota.
Yeah. No, but it's a different sport. You're talking about a Sean Lewis offense.
Yep.
That is pass tempo, and you're talking about the most deliberate offense in the country. So it is. Yeah, this game can go myriad ways, and it's great. This is why we love. These are the matchups why we love the sport.
And guys, this is last week we get to see everybody, right? We get to see what everybody – we got to see Colorado. We got to see Nebraska, new regimes coming in there. Now, after this, we learn. We learn more about it. We talked about Alabama and Texas. I got enough of Rice on tape. I got enough of Middle Tennessee on tape. Now we get to see these teams with what they have when you're talking about, going at it for 60 minutes against a level talent team. So that's what I'm most excited about this week, is we get to learn more about these teams.
You know what the biggest advantage Nebraska has, at least when they have the ball? Their style of play will probably minimize the impact of Travis Hunter when he's playing cornerback. But a big problem is going to be they can do anything about it when he's playing wide receiver. That'll be the question.
But, that's the other thing, too, with the rules, Pete. I get it. You know what the goal is going to be for Nebraska. What you have to do to take advantage of that is have the lead.
Yes.
So that's where coming out, that's why I think you see the frustration of teams in other conferences talking about the rules and everything. That's what it comes down to. So, yeah, I can't wait to see the contrast of styles.
All right, we should call this Strange Faces in Unfamiliar Places Saturday. Texas A&M, a 4.5-point favorite, going to Miami. That's at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Pete, Rece, Steve.
A fascinating game, referendum on the NIL era. You don't want to be the loser of this game, right? You've got two fan bases that are already pretty well ticked off, and two coaches that need a jump start to get things going in the right direction. I am going to take Texas A&M in this game. I'm going to take them because I just think they're a more fully baked cake right now in terms of talent. I thought Miami blowing out the other Miami on Friday night was a nice step forward for that team. Remember, early last year, Middle Tennessee absolutely curb stomped Miami. They didn't beat them flukily 9-6. They scored 45, ran away from them on special teams. So Miami needs to grow. I don't think they've grown to the point yet where they can match up with A&M's talent. So I am going to take the O's, Jimbo, Petrino, Adazio, and I think they can go there and score.
Texas A&M dropped 52 on New Mexico. You say big deal. They scored a grand total of 51 points in their 3 non-conference games against FBS opponents last season. 3. The Petrino effect was obvious. Canes haven't beaten an SEC opponent since 2013, and it won't start Saturday. I'll take Texas A&M and lay them.
Yeah, you mentioned the 52, Rece. I was dead wrong. I thought it would be, not sloppy, but just more methodical in coming out for A&M. And I took on my 6-pack, I took New Mexico. They did not get there, plus the 38. 52 points, I believe, is the most points they've scored versus an FBS opponent since the 74-72 win against LSU. They come out and score 5 straight possessions, 5 straight touchdowns to start the game. I thought Wegman looked fantastic. The big thing you mentioned him, Pete Adazio, say what you want about the guy. He still knows how to coach offensive line. They have their guys now. I think they were trying to, play guys in different positions last year, and that led to a lot of the struggles early on, including that loss to App State. So I'm taking A&M here. It's scary that all 3 of us are on the same side, but this is a roster difference to me, too. To A&M, SEC roster, Miami. Important for them to take that next step last week. We saw that. Van Dyke looked more comfortable, but I think more A&M just has better players across the board laying the points on the road. Don't love it, but we got to do it.
A strange face in an unfamiliar place. Oregon, a 6.5-point favorite at Texas Tech. That's 7 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go Rece, Steve, Pete for this one.
This is a game I've been excited about since the offseason with Tyler Shuck, the Texas Tech quarterback, facing his old team. He was the starter for Oregon during 2020, was benched often in favor of Anthony Brown, ended up going to Texas Tech. Has had great success there for the most part when he's been able to stay healthy. An aside, the dumbest move, the biggest dumb loses more than smart wins ever was my super dog pick, not necessarily taking South Alabama and just being wrong. It's not a big deal. When in doubt about the super dog, take Mustard in Laramie, period. Always. And Wyoming beat Texas Tech in a really entertaining game late Saturday night, which leaves the Red Raiders really, really desperate because there was some optimism. Could be a dark horse in the Big 12. Here was an opportunity to get on the national stage. Now it's an opportunity to keep the start of your season from really spinning sideways in a hurry. I'm really scared to do this, but having seen flying tortillas and all manner of weird things happen in Lubbock, especially when the Red Raiders are desperate, I'm going to take the home dog. I think Oregon's the better team. I think Oregon probably pulls out the win, but I think Texas Tech will make it entertaining and keep it within the number.
All offseason, we were asked to, what do you think about thoughts of the Pac-12? Who's going to win it? Can Utah repeat? And whenever Oregon came up, guys, I thought about the new offensive coordinator, Will Stein. I thought he had the trickiest job coming into the conference because we saw Bo Nix at a level last year we never saw. And when you come in, you have to have some bravado. You have an ego as an offensive coordinator in your own beliefs. How much do you change? How much do you adapt to what you have? I think that's a tough transition. And now you go out and score 80+ against Portland State. That's great and all. Now you got to go and do it against a Power 5 opponent. I'm really interested to see Oregon's defense on the road here. Texas Tech is going to create problems. We know that with that style of play. I'm with Rece. I'm taking the home. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I could easily see Oregon winning the game, but I'm going to take the home dog plus the points with the Red Raiders.
Well, I need to disagree with you guys just on the simple fact that we just can't have
we
can't just give these games away.
And we call it saving the graphic on game day.
Yeah. I'm saving the graphic. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely saving the graphic here. I was on the fence. The thing that had me pondering Texas Tech was the end of Oregon's season last year when they lose by 3 to Washington, win by 3 against Utah, lose by 4 to Oregon State, kind of scrape back and somehow capture that bowl game by a digit against a pretty mediocre Carolina team. Like, I just don't know if this program is yet built to go on the road, pounce, capture, and kill. But that said, they're going to go pounce, capture, and kill. I'm going to take Bo Nix and the boys. They could certainly win this game by 10 points. I do think talent-wise, we shouldn't underestimate what Dan Lanning has done there, both in recruiting and in the portal, to build that talent to a different level. It has been consistent Georgia-like in the way he learned and where he learned it. And I'm not saying they're as talented as Georgia, but I think they have that blueprint. They have the collective muscle, and they are headed towards that paradigm in a few years.
The Notre Dame hype train is really going to take off here if they can take down North Carolina State in Raleigh. The Irish are a 7.5-point favorite, again, on the road. That's a 12 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. Let's go Steve, Pete, Rece.
I mentioned it before. Week 2, we get to learn a lot more about teams. We've seen Sam Hartman in that offense. We've seen that defense improve against inferior opponents. Now you go on the road and see what you got against a team and a coach who always has his team prepared. Brennan Armstrong, I thought, was phenomenal in talking about this matchup. I was at the game in Charlottesville a couple years ago. He missed it against Notre Dame because of an injury. Now he gets his chance to play, the biggest brand in – is it still – we got to use quotes when we put Notre Dame in the ACC, right, Pete? Is that the way we do it?
Yeah, it's like an awkward marriage. They're like not divorced, but they're separated. Is that like the
they
best
call when they want to?
Yeah.
That's it's one of those relationships.
It's an open relationship, I guess.
I'm ecstatic we get this game early in the day too. I think that's one of the most underrated fan bases in that conference in Raleigh. It's not going to be pretty. NC State will muck it up. I will take them plus the points.
I need to take a home team at some point, so I think I'm going to do it here. I really like what Notre Dame has seen. I do think this is just a different class of talent, and there is going to be the relentless march to inevitability is going to get stuck in the mud here a little bit. I kind of like that NC State had some adversity in the game against UConn. Like, I think you learn a lot from yourself when you do go and win a road game to start. That is a game, late in the half. So. And you wonder if they held a little bit back there too. You know what I mean? Just in that. So I think Sam Hartman, obviously Rece has chronicled this a few times, has struggled a bit against the goofy Tony Gibson defense. So I think we'll get it, and I think NC State will manage to mess it up like it mostly does in these big moments. But I like that 7.5. That's a good number. I would think the under would be attractive here too.
I'm not going to be able to save the graphic. Pete referenced it. Hartman's thrown 6 picks in his last 2 games against Gibson's defense. But I do think it's instructive to point out that this is an entirely different offensive philosophy. So how much of that was scheme? Certainly Wake had great receivers, great passing game. But, maybe it was a good matchup. The old echo it for the 5,000th time. Styles make fights. So I'm not saying that just because Sam Hartman's going to go in and see that Wolfpack headgear that he's going to start throwing the ball to the other team. Not suggesting that. But I like NC State in the points. I need to see a little more from Notre Dame before I believe they go on the road and cover against what will be a pretty solid defense. NC State had some busts, a couple in the running game that were a little uncharacteristic in the UConn game. Notre Dame's got a great offensive line. They'll be able to run it some. But I expect it to be low scoring enough for the Wolfpack to stay within the number.
Next up, Ole Miss traveling to Tulane. Ole Miss a 7.5-point favorite on the road. That's at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Let's go Pete, Rece, Steve.
We'll be quick on this one. I don't know if I trust the wave to stop Ole Miss's run game. So I think this game could be junky for a little while, and I think it could be close. But I just think that stopping the run will be very, very hard with Junkins coming in, and I think Lane is going to maybe just try to get out of there with a win. But I think that Ole Miss wins. Biggest game on biggest home game for Tulane since 1949. So I hope that place is jumping and jacked. I wish this was later in the season because that'd be a fun place to have game day. I just don't think the wave is quite there yet to go toe-to-toe with the old SEC.
In typical Louisiana fashion, you pick against them one week and they think you hate their team. All Rece and I did last week was take South Alabama plus the points. And little did we know, those Green Wave fans were chomping at the bit after that game, coming in hot and hot. Man, they were livid when you pick against their team. So maybe we'll make this an ongoing thing. I'm going to lay the points with Ole Miss. I love the sophistication of the run game Lane Kiffin brings to the table. Judkins is phenomenal. I think I know they have more talent on both lines of scrimmage. Michael Pratt, this is a spot. If you're that guy, you beat an SEC team at home. I hate the 7.5, but I'm taking the road team with the Rebels on the road. Lay the points.
I don't hate the 7.5 at all. I gladly give the 7.5. Hotty toddy, gosh almighty, who the heck are they? Flim flam bim bam Ole Miss, by damn. And you're right, Steve. All 32 Tulane fans were upset with us. But let me make this proclamation to my great friends in New Orleans surrounding Tulane and the Green Wave. I don't hate your team. In fact, I love your team. I'm really high on your coach. I'm happy for you that a lot of the schools that I thought should have hired your coach in the past have not done so. I'm happy for you. He's brilliant. They've got a really, really good team. And if Tulane wins this game, I promise you this. I don't care who they play the rest of the season. I will pick Tulane, period. The rest of the season, I have no other option other than to pick Tulane. Not if they cover, if they win the game outright. But I'm going to take Ole Miss and lay the points because I think if Lane can keep them focused and keep himself, locked in and on track, I think Ole Miss has a chance to be really, really good this year. So I'm going to go Ole Miss and the cover.
Let's go Cyhawk. Iowa, a 4-point favorite at Iowa State. That's at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Let's go Rece, Steve, Pete for the order.
You guys realize since 2018, only one time has either team in this game scored more than 18 points. One time they've scored more than 18. We've had some 18-17s. We've had some 10-3s. But Iowa pays property taxes in Ames. They've won the last 5 times there. I was impressed with what Iowa State did because historically they struggle not only in September, but against Northern Iowa particularly, or they have a couple of times. I don't like picking Iowa to cover anything, but with all of the problems with the suspensions, more of them at Iowa State than Iowa, though both have been caught up in the gambling thing. I'm going to bite my lip, clench my fist, and take the drive to 325 and Brian Ferentz to cover the 4 in a 10-6 victory. Or 11-6, because that would cover. I'd love to see all this. 11-6, no push. 11-6 Iowa.
11-6. Well, is that a touchdown for Iowa State or in a missed extra point, or is it 2 field goals?
3 safeties.
3 safeties.
They were better early.
Is there a prop bet on number of safeties? Because I'll take the over.
Yeah, they were pretty. Iowa was pretty good on offense in the first half, and then it sort of disappeared. But McNamara was pretty good in the first half.
To your point, Rece, the over-under on this game is 36.5. 36.5.
It's like Army-Navy.
It is. That is an Army-Navy number. All the simulations that could be run, I would love to see how this is not a field goal game. I will take the Cyclones plus the 4.
Stanford Steve, I'm disappointed in you. As an advocate for tight ends, you're going against a program that ran out, I believe, 3 times on Saturday in 14 personnel.
They did.
14 personnel. Stanford didn't even do that. Like back when David Shaw was doing all those creative things on the O-line. They ran out in 14 personnel. They have 2 high-end tight ends in Eric All and Lachey. I feel like with the losses that the Cyclones have had collectively, 5 starters, you cannot absorb that as a program when you're Iowa State. You just can't absorb a 5-starter veteran loss and still go toe-to-toe with Iowa. Iowa's had some losses from the gambling situation, but they've been more modest. I just feel like you have to just go with who has more collective brute force. I also thought I watched a bunch of the start of Iowa, Utah State. I thought the offense looked okay. And Kirk was going for it on 4th down. It was, deep in the other end. So yeah, I take Iowa. I think this is like a 16-3 kind of game.
Watch out for Iowa State's tight ends in this game, Pete. I will say that.
Okay. Who do you got?
There's a plethora.
All right.
Plethora. Their names will be known after the game.
We got what appears to be a weird line to me. Steve, you can fill us in. Utah, 7.5-point favorite on the road at Baylor. That kicks off at noon Eastern. And we'll start with Steve. We'll go to Pete and then Rece.
Yeah, and all the sports books, once the summer comes, put out games of the year. And two this week that really stand out, guys, are the Colorado-Nebraska game, which opened as Nebraska, an 8.5-point favorite. We touched on that earlier. They're a 3-point underdog now. And this game, obviously, the loss last week, the quarterback injury to Shapen. Baylor was favored in this game over the summer, and now Utah, you said it, Taylor, 7.5-point favorite. Are we going to see rising? This line makes me think we're gonna. I don't know how much we're going to see. I thought Utah, as they do, next man up mentality last week against Florida, came out and gave it to the Gators in a game where we didn't know what we were going to see, and we saw it. Now we learn how deep that roster is for Utah. I can't stand this pick, but I'm going to take Baylor plus the points. I just feel like Aranda will have things to frustrate Utah offensively. Whoever plays quarterback, it'll be a low scoring game, and the home team covers. I don't think they win. Somehow they make it an ugly game and cover the number.
Well, Aranda didn't have much, and Matt Pallage, the new DC, didn't have much to frustrate Texas State offensively. They had no answers. Now, again, different sport, right? Texas State is running and gunning Texas high school football, fun stuff. Utah obviously has a pretty defiant identity that they've had for about 20 years under Kyle Whittingham, especially with the quarterback change at Baylor from injury. The early read on rising is optimism, guys. Hopefully I'll have more later in the week and certainly Saturday morning on game day to update that. But Kyle Whittingham said this week he's cleared for all practice activities with no restrictions. So it's going to be a bit of a feel thing of how he feels at the end of the week. But that feels to me like a pretty good pathway for him to play. And Whittingham was pretty clear, like they're not saving him for conference play. Like they want him to go when he's ready to go. So I feel like these are two similarly constructed programs and similar philosophies. And I just feel like Utah's a step ahead right now in point of attack dominance. So I'm going to take them. And the points, that number's big and it scares me. So I can relate to where Steve went. But I think Utah can figure it out. I did love Nate Johnson as a change of pace guy, by the way. Like what a weapon he is, and what a dynamic, fun player to watch. So look for him to maybe make some cameos regardless of who's there. Because Whittingham did say against Florida, if Rising played, they were still going to use him in a Wildcat way.
I agree with everything that's been said. I'm scared to death because sort of the Texas Tech philosophy against Oregon. When you've been wounded like that and you come back desperate, you feel like, even though I know they have conference play ahead, you feel as if your season's on the line here. But I think Utah is a lot better than Baylor, and they don't flinch on the road. They sort of relish those challenges. I'm going to take Utah to cover.
We got time for one or two more here. Let's do
That's
Wisconsin.
Why I went short, baby. That's why I went short. Let's go.
There you go. Pros Pro, Rece Davis, Wisconsin, 6.5-point favorite at Washington State, 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff time. I don't remember the order. Let's go Pete, Rece, Steve.
So obviously, Washington State won this game last year, which really was the beginning of the end for Paul Chryst. And Washington State sneaky put up one of the better Week 1 performances. They hung 50 on the road at Colorado State. Look, Colorado State is not an elite Mountain West program. They were pretty bad last year. They obviously have a ways to go. But if you go on the road against, in an opener against a functional program and put up 50 in your Washington State, which since Mike Leach has left hasn't exactly been a hang 50 kind of program, that certainly opened my eyes a little bit and showed that Cam Ward is making some leaps and has some weapons. So that said, I just feel like Wisconsin will be able to score. They showed they were able to run it, and I think they can eventually wear them down with the 1-2 punch at tailback. So I'm sorry for not going short, but I'm going to take the Badgers.
I'm going with the Cougs to win the game outright. Mordecai threw a couple of interceptions last week, so the passing game's still spotty. This on the heels of the spring game in which he threw some interceptions. You're going into the Palouse, Martin Stadium. everybody knows my affinity for going there, favorite game day. Cam Ward put on a great show last week, but there's also this factor. And a fellow Stanford alum of yours, Steve, once told me that the difficulty of playing Washington State on the road is that you go there and the hotel's not what you used to. The trip is difficult. The food is difficult. The stadium's small. It's just hard to play there. Well, Wazoo beat them in Camp Randall last year. I think Washington State wins the game outright.
Agreed. I was on the field for when Ryan Leaf struck the Heisman pose on us. That was us. That he beat that day before they won the Apple Cup and went to the Rose Bowl that year back in 97. It is. You stay in Moscow, Idaho, and you're like, where the hell are you here? Looking at Wisconsin, I still feel like they're gonna progress offensively. Stuff was a little, working around. I two tight ends that I thought were going to be on the roster, they were, I think asked to leave the program as camp started. So I think there's still some working around, knowing how integral part they are, and Longo instilling what he wants. I'm really, really impressed with what Wazoo looked like last week. I went against them. I took Colorado State as my super dog, Rece, and that game was over quick. And I give them all the credit in the world to Wazoo. So they're not afraid of them. You mentioned it. They went to Madison last year and beat them up front. I think Wisconsin can win the game, but to be safe, I'm going to take the home team plus the points.
Last one here. Let's do Big 12 after dark. Oklahoma State, a 3.5-point favorite at Arizona State, 10:30 p.m. kickoff time. Let's go Pete, Rece, Steve.
Interesting game because still a lot of unknowns. We do know Jaden Rashada starts. Drew Pine will likely be back either for Fresno next week or USC the week after. Rashada had some nice moments. The offense struggled a little bit in 25-mile-an-hour winds when they couldn't pass. After the 2-hour and 45-minute dust storm, I was told Arizona State players were doing homework in the locker room because they had stuff due that night, and it was by midnight, it was going to be too late. So anyway, apropos of nothing, I am going to take the Sun Devils, if mostly because Oklahoma State struggled against Central Arkansas. Oklahoma State tends to struggle early, and Gundy does a good job bringing them along, but just a boatload of unknowns here. So I'm going to go with the home team. Jalen Conyers, the star tight end, probably the best player on the Arizona State roster, missed the second half against Utah State. He will be back for this game.
I'm going to go, you mentioned it, a lot of unknowns here, Pete. I trust Mike Gundy. That's the one thing you look at this game. First-time head coach for Arizona State. Crazy circumstances to get your first win last week. Rashada, the freshman quarterback, I think Oklahoma State, we see it frustrate the freshman quarterback. I trust Mike Gundy here. I in this situation, I don't know if anybody lost more transfers in the portal than Oklahoma State, especially in the Big 12. But I know what Gundy brings as a mantra. They've been in these types of games before. You mentioned it. After dark, maybe a change of conference officially next year. But I will take the Cowboys on the road here.
I'm going to do the same. And this is the game that I feel like I've just put on a blindfold and throwing a dart. I don't know what to expect really from either team after last week. So I'm going to go with, even though they lost a bunch of guys, there at least is some continuity and structure at Oklahoma State, and Kenny Dillingham, who I like a lot, is going to get it going. Not sure that Saturday is going to be the time. So give me the Pokes on the road. How many picks did we get through there, Taylor? Is that a record?
10, 11 games.
And I think only 2 were unsaved graphics, right? I think only 2 were unanimous, correct?
That's good. That's good for content. We need to save the graphic. Not everybody be caught up in groupthink or anything like that. That said, when we were about 6 picks in, I was like, man, I'm trying to go with my gut here, but this feels like 0-6. It's so I guess we'll find out Saturday. But I was like, man, does this feel like 0-6? So
Well, there's going to be a lot of teams upset on the road this week. Like that, you could just, as we went through it in this way, it was sort of visceral to me. We're like, oh, there's some home team. There's going to be some field storming Saturday night on College Football Rewind. That's there's going to be some Wallace Wades from Monday playing out in some different spots, which is great.
Brings a little balance to everything. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Join us for College Game Day Saturday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern time from the Quad in Tuscaloosa, and continue to download this wherever you like to get your podcast. If you subscribe, we wind up right in your feed, and that's a beautiful thing. It eliminates the work for you. Have a great college football weekend, everybody. Thanks for listening.